She grew up in a small town where everyone seemed to know each other's lives. The streets were narrow and quiet, lined with houses that leaned toward each other as if sharing secrets. Her home was at the edge of the town, a modest place that never drew attention, tucked between a few older buildings. Her father worked long hours as a janitor in the local school, and her mother cleaned houses to help make ends meet. Money was always tight, and the world of luxuries and indulgence that other children seemed to know felt distant and unreachable to her. From a young age, she had learned the value of patience and hard work. While other children played in the afternoon sun, she would sit at the kitchen table and help her mother scrub dishes or mend clothes. Even though the tasks were ordinary, she found joy in small victories. The dishes sparkled, the tears on worn clothes disappeared, and each accomplishment reminded her that she could make a difference in her little world. Her earliest memories of music were accidental. There was a small upright piano in the corner of the local school's auditorium. It had chipped keys, some sticking, and a faded veneer that bore the marks of time and countless hands. It was an instrument that no one paid attention to because it was old and imperfect. But to her, it was a portal to something magical. The first time she pressed a key, the note that came out seemed to vibrate in her chest in a way that words never could. It was not just sound, it was feeling. She pressed another key, then another, letting her fingers wander across the uneven surface. The melody was clumsy, but she didn't care. In that moment, she felt alive in a way that chores and errands could never give her. She began spending more time near the piano whenever she could. It was not easy. She had to wait until the halls were empty, after classes ended and teachers had gone home. Sometimes she would hide behind the curtains, peeking to make sure no one was watching, and then slip in to touch the keys. Her hands learned slowly, but with each visit, her confidence grew. She discovered that she could remember tunes she had heard on the radio or humming in the streets, and she could play them by ear. It was like she was speaking a secret language that only she could understand. The small town didn't offer much in terms of opportunities for a young girl with a hidden talent. Music lessons were expensive, and her parents could barely cover the bills for food and rent. Yet, she was not discouraged. She had a notebook where she would scribble down notes and patterns she noticed from the few times she had seen a real piano teacher demonstrating scales. Sometimes she would go to the library to borrow music books, teaching herself from diagrams and written instructions. She was determined, even if no one around her understood, why a janitor's daughter would spend hours with her hands on an old, battered piano instead of playing outside like other children. At school, life was a mix of normalcy and small hardships. She carried herself quietly, aware of her modest clothes and worn shoes, feeling the eyes of classmates that often judged what they could see but not what they could not. Some kids teased her, calling her father a janitor as if it were an insult. But she had learned to let the words slide. She understood that her worth was not defined by her family's job or the clothes she wore. Her music was her refuge, a place where no one's opinion could reach her. The first person who truly noticed her talent was the music teacher at school. It happened on a rainy afternoon when the halls were slippery, and most students were hiding in their classrooms. She had sneaked into the auditorium to practice quietly. The music teacher had returned to the school to retrieve a forgotten book and stopped at the doorway, hearing a soft, uneven melody that carried a surprising sense of emotion. She watched silently, unsure whether to interrupt or simply listen. The girl's fingers moved carefully across the keys, but even with mistakes, there was a natural rhythm, a sense of understanding that could not be taught. After a few moments, the teacher cleared her throat gently. The girl jumped, startled, and turned toward the voice. She expected scolding, but instead found curiosity and warmth in the teacher's eyes. "You have a gift," the teacher said quietly. "Have you ever taken lessons?" The girl shook her head, embarrassed. She had not even considered that her playing might be worth noticing. The teacher smiled and told her she would help her whenever possible, promising to lend books and give small tips. It was the first time someone had acknowledged her talent without judgment. From that day forward, she found herself sneaking into the auditorium more often, sometimes just to hear the teacher's advice whispered over her mistakes, sometimes to play alone and let the music flow through her without concern for perfection. Each note became more confident, more expressive. She discovered that the piano could mirror her feelings in a way words could not. When she was sad, her fingers pressed heavy, slow keys. When she was excited, her hands flew across the instrument, creating rapid, bright melodies. The piano became a mirror of her inner world, a companion that listened without question. At home, her parents noticed the change in her. She spent hours in her room practicing, sometimes humming softly to herself, sometimes tapping invisible keys on her desk. They did not fully understand the depth of her talent, but they saw the joy it brought her, and that was enough. Her father, tired from long shifts at the school, would sometimes sit quietly in the corner while she played, nodding along to the rhythms, feeling proud in ways he never knew how to express. Her mother would pause her chores to listen, feeling a warmth in her chest that only comes from seeing a child discovering their own magic. Even though her talent was growing, life was still filled with struggles. The school piano was sometimes locked, forcing her to wait for hours or days to practice. The weather made the hallways damp and cold, and she often returned home with chilled fingers and aching joints. Yet, every challenge only strengthened her determination. Each obstacle was a small barrier she learned to navigate, and each victory, no matter how small, felt monumental. Her peers continued their lives, most unaware of the small miracles happening behind the closed doors of the auditorium. She remained quiet among them, carrying herself with humility and a quiet confidence. She never boasted about her abilities, even though they were growing beyond what she could have imagined. There was a sense of mystery around her, a secret world she carried inside, and that made her presence intriguing without her having to speak. By the time she reached her early teens, her playing had become something remarkable, even to those who had first doubted her. She had learned to control dynamics, to create emotion with each note, to bring life to silent keys. The small janitor's daughter, who had once pressed a key by accident, was becoming a musician capable of moving hearts without saying a single word. Her world, once limited to chores and modest homes, was expanding with every note she played, hinting at possibilities that seemed larger than the town itself. Though she had no audience yet beyond the occasional teacher or parent, her mind was filled with dreams. She imagined stages, concert halls, and the applause of people who might never have known a girl like her existed. But for now, she was content to play in the empty auditorium, letting the music carry her beyond the limits of her daily life. Each practice session was a step toward something she could not yet name but felt deeply in her chest. A future that awaited her, fragile and bright, like a single note held in perfect resonance. Her journey had only just begun. The small victories, the secret lessons, and the quiet moments with the piano were the foundation of something extraordinary. She did not yet know how far it would take her, nor did she understand the astonishment her music would one day inspire. But she played with all her heart, every note a declaration that talent and passion could rise from the humblest beginnings. In the solitude of the auditorium, with the keys worn beneath her fingers and the echo of each note lingering in the air, she found a world entirely her own, waiting for her to leave her mark upon it. She became more secretive with her piano practice, often slipping away after school or early in the morning when the hallways were empty. The worn keys under her fingers seemed to understand her thoughts and feelings better than anyone else around her. She played softly at first, letting the notes float into the air like a secret message, and then she would grow bolder, testing melodies she had imagined, sometimes even creating new ones. Each day, her fingers grew stronger, more precise, and the music began to carry a depth that surprised even herself. Her schoolmates never knew the real world she lived in. They saw a quiet girl who kept to herself, who rarely spoke unless spoken to. They did not understand why she would spend hours in the empty auditorium when there were playgrounds and games waiting for her. But for her, the piano was more than an instrument. It was a place of safety, a world where the struggles of her home did not follow her, where she could exist purely in sound and rhythm. She could tell a story with a melody, express anger, joy, or sadness in a way words could never capture. Some days were harder than others. The school piano was old, some keys stuck, Others played notes that were slightly off. It frustrated her, but she learned to work around it, to make the imperfections part of her music instead of letting them stop her. Sometimes she imagined herself at a grand piano in a big concert hall, with the smooth keys responding perfectly to her every movement. The thought drove her to keep practicing, to dream beyond the worn wood of the auditorium and the small town that had always defined her life. She began to notice subtle changes in herself. Her confidence grew quietly, and she carried herself with a little more pride even among those who did not know her secret. The music teacher continued to support her in small ways, lending books and showing her small techniques that made her playing more expressive. Occasionally, the teacher would sit nearby while she played, watching the way her hands moved over the keys. The teacher never pushed too hard, understanding that her talent was delicate and needed time to grow naturally. At home, her parents observed the changes with a mixture of curiosity and pride. Her father, who cleaned the school halls and classrooms every day, sometimes stayed up late to watch her practice. He would lean against the doorway, his tired eyes following her hands as they moved across the keys. He did not know much about music, but he could feel the emotion and dedication she put into every note. Her mother noticed how her daughter hummed softly while doing chores, and how she could disappear into a corner of the room for hours, lost in her own world. Both parents understood that this was important, even if they could not fully grasp the depth of her talent. Despite the small victories, challenges continued to arise. There were days when she returned to find the piano covered with dust or the hall locked for maintenance. There were times when the sound of laughter from other students outside made her feel invisible, like she did not belong in the world she longed to be part of. Yet, she refused to let these obstacles deter her. Each setback became a lesson in patience and resilience. She learned that persistence was just as important as talent, and that every small effort brought her closer to the music she wanted to create. Her imagination played a large role in her growth. She would sit at the piano and imagine herself performing in front of an audience, seeing their faces light up at the sound of her music. She imagined famous musicians listening and nodding with approval, imagining her melodies filling the air of grand halls. It was more than fantasy. It was preparation, a mental rehearsal that gave her the courage to continue despite the odds. The dreams became fuel, pushing her to explore more complex pieces and experiment with her own compositions. Occasionally, neighbors or school staff would catch a glimpse of her practice sessions. They would hear music drifting through open windows, a melody that seemed far beyond her years. Some were surprised to learn that the janitor's daughter, from such a modest background, could play with such skill and feeling. Whispers of her talent began to circulate quietly, but she remained humble, never seeking attention or recognition. She played for herself, for the joy and the freedom that came with creating something beautiful. Her school life continued alongside her secret passion. She attended classes, completed assignments, and helped her parents at home. The duality of her life became a rhythm in itself, the world of responsibility and routine during the day, and the secret, expressive world of music when she could steal moments for herself. It was exhausting at times, but the reward was the deep satisfaction she felt when she played. Each note carried a piece of her spirit, and the piano became an extension of who she was. One day, a visiting musician came to the school to give a small demonstration. She had only intended to watch quietly from the back, as she had done with other visitors. But when the musician mentioned that students could try a few notes on the piano, she could not resist. Her hands moved instinctively, finding the keys with a confidence she had never felt around strangers. The musician stopped and turned to look at her, eyes wide with surprise. The simple melody she played carried an unexpected depth and emotion, and for the first time, she saw someone outside her world recognize her gift. The musician praised her softly, encouraging her to keep exploring and practicing. The words felt like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. For the first time, she realized that her music could reach beyond the walls of the school auditorium, that people could truly hear and feel what she expressed. It was a small moment, but it became a turning point, planting the seed of belief that her talent was not just for secret hours in empty halls, but for a wider world. After that day, she began to take her practice even more seriously. She set small goals for herself, learning pieces that challenged her technical skills and emotional expression. She would play them over and over until each note felt natural, until she could let go of fear and simply allow the music to flow. She learned patience, the understanding that mastery comes not overnight, but with dedication, persistence, and love for what she was doing. Her parents continued to support her, even when they did not understand every note. Her father would listen quietly while she practiced late into the evening, nodding along and feeling proud of how far she had come. Her mother would pause her chores to hear a snippet of a melody, smiling softly at the joy it brought her daughter. Their encouragement was not always verbal, but it was there, steady and comforting, a reminder that she was not alone in her journey. As the weeks turned into months, her reputation quietly grew. Teachers and neighbors began to speak in hushed tones about the janitor's daughter with the unusual gift. But she remained humble, never allowing the whispers to inflate her ego. She knew that her journey was just beginning, and that the real test would come when she played for people who could change her life with their recognition. For now, she focused on the music itself, on the joy of creating, and on the small victories that each day brought. She discovered that music could express what words could not. When she was happy, the melodies were light and playful. When she was sad, the music became heavy and slow, full of emotion. Each composition became a reflection of her inner life, a diary written in sound rather than letters. It was a secret language, one that only those who truly listened could understand. And with each passing day, she felt more connected to that language, more confident in her ability to communicate through it. Her journey was far from easy, but it was hers entirely. She had taken the accidental discovery of an old piano and turned it into a world of wonder and possibility. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new joys. She learned that talent alone was not enough. It needed patience, courage, and a willingness to keep going even when no one was watching. The janitor's daughter, once invisible in her small town, was quietly growing into something extraordinary, and the world had yet to see the heights she would reach. A special event came to the school one bright spring morning. A music competition was announced for students, and several famous artists were invited to attend and judge the performances. Her heart raced when she heard about it. She had never performed in front of strangers before, let alone people who were well known for their skill and experience. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready, but then a spark of courage lit within her. This was the chance she had been dreaming of, the moment to show the world what she could do. She spent days preparing for the competition. Every free moment was dedicated to practicing the piece she had chosen, a composition she had been perfecting in secret. She carefully thought about how each note should sound, how her hands would move, and how to express the emotions that lived in her heart. The piano had become an extension of herself, and she wanted every note to tell a story. She imagined the audience listening closely, feeling the music as deeply as she did. Her parents noticed her nervous excitement. They encouraged her softly, offering words of comfort and confidence. Her father reminded her of the hours she had spent learning and practicing, and how far she had already come. Her mother simply hugged her and whispered that she believed in her. Their support was steady and grounding, calming the anxiety that bubbled within her. She realized that no matter what happened, they would be proud, and that gave her strength. On the day of the competition, the school auditorium was buzzing with activity. Students from different grades were practicing, teachers were coordinating the event, and parents were finding seats in the crowded hall. The famous artists were seated at the front, their expressions serious but attentive, ready to hear the talent that might appear before them. She could feel the energy in the room, a mix of excitement and tension, and it made her heart beat faster. When it was her turn, she stepped onto the stage, her hands slightly trembling. The spotlight hit her, and the room fell quiet. She took a deep breath, remembering the countless hours spent in empty halls, practicing alone, and she let the memories settle in her mind. The piano waited, its keys familiar and comforting, and she allowed herself to focus solely on the music. Her fingers touched the keys, softly at first, testing the sound, feeling the instrument respond beneath her hands. The first notes were hesitant but confident, carrying a sense of anticipation that rippled through the silent auditorium. As she continued, the music grew richer, more expressive, each note a reflection of her emotions, each chord a bridge to the hearts of those listening. She lost herself in the music, forgetting the audience, the judges, and even her own nervousness. The famous artists in the front row exchanged glances, clearly impressed by the depth and maturity of her performance. They had seen many talented students before, but something about her playing was different. It was not just skill. It was feeling, a raw honesty that reached beyond technical mastery. Each note seemed to speak directly to them, revealing the story of a young girl who had discovered her voice through dedication and passion. The audience leaned forward, captivated. Teachers and students alike were silent, drawn into the world she had created with her music. It was as if the auditorium had transformed, the walls disappearing, leaving only her and the piano, the melodies stretching out and touching everyone present. For a moment, there was no distinction between performer and listener. Everyone was united in the experience, carried away by the beauty of sound. As she reached the climax of the piece, her hands flew over the keys with a confidence that surprised even her. She had spent so many hours imagining this moment that now it felt natural, as if the music had been waiting inside her all along, waiting for the chance to emerge. The final note lingered in the air, a perfect ending that resonated in the hearts of everyone present. The room remained silent for a moment, caught between awe and disbelief, before applause erupted, filling the space with warmth and energy. She looked up, her eyes meeting those of the famous artists. They nodded, smiling, clearly moved by the performance. One of them, a well-known pianist, whispered words of encouragement, telling her that she had a rare gift. Her heart swelled with a mixture of pride and disbelief. She had never imagined that her music could have such an impact, that her hours of practice and perseverance could reach people who were known for their own mastery of the art. After the performance, she stepped off the stage, still trembling but smiling. Students and teachers came to congratulate her, some with wide eyes, others with whispered praise. Her parents hugged her tightly, tears in their eyes, proud beyond words. It was a moment of recognition, of validation, and it filled her with a sense of possibility she had never felt before. She realized that her dream of sharing her music was no longer just a fantasy. It was becoming reality. In the days that followed, the news of her performance spread quietly through the town and the school. People spoke of the janitor's daughter who had played with the heart of a seasoned musician, who had left famous artists astonished with her first note. Yet she remained humble, focusing on the music itself rather than the attention. She understood that this was just one step, and that her journey was far from over. There were more pieces to learn, more skills to master, and more moments to create. Her confidence continued to grow, not only in her ability to play but in her belief in herself. She began to imagine performing in larger venues, in front of bigger audiences, and even traveling to share her music beyond the small town. These thoughts no longer seemed impossible. She had experienced the power of her music firsthand and knew that with continued dedication, she could reach heights she had once only dreamed of. The piano remained her constant companion, a source of comfort and inspiration. Every time she sat at the keys, she remembered the sensation of the first note she had played, the first melody that had stirred her heart. She thought of the empty halls where she had practiced for hours, the small victories that had led to this moment, and the unwavering support of her parents and teacher. Each memory strengthened her resolve, reminding her that talent combined with determination could overcome obstacles and open doors. Even as the excitement of the competition faded, the experience had left a lasting impression. She continued to practice with renewed energy, exploring new pieces and experimenting with her own compositions. She began to understand that music was not just about performing for others, but about expressing herself and connecting with the emotions that lived within her. Each note became a reflection of her journey, a story told without words, carrying the listener into her world. Her days were filled with a delicate balance of school, family responsibilities, and music. It was not always easy, but the rewards were profound. The discipline she had developed through practice helped her in her studies, and the emotional expression she found in music enriched her relationships with those around her. She became more aware of the world, more empathetic, and more capable of understanding the struggles and joys of others. She also began to notice opportunities she had never seen before. Local musicians and teachers who had attended the competition approached her with offers to guide her, to help her develop her skills further. They saw potential in her that extended beyond her age or circumstances. She listened carefully, absorbing advice and learning from their experience, while still maintaining her own voice and vision. Each interaction was a step forward, a chance to grow and refine her craft. Her parents watched with pride, sometimes struggling to express the depth of their feelings. They knew that their daughter's life was changing, that doors they had never imagined were opening before her. Yet they also understood the importance of keeping her grounded, of ensuring that her humility and dedication remained intact. They reminded her gently of her roots, of the values that had guided her through her early years, and she took their words to heart, carrying them as a steady foundation beneath the soaring music of her dreams. Through it all, she remained connected to the piano, the source of her joy and inspiration. Every practice session, every note played, was a reminder of where she had come from and what she had achieved. The janitor's daughter, once hidden in the quiet corners of a small town, was now stepping into the light, sharing her music with a world that was just beginning to recognize the depth of her talent. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, but she also knew that her passion and dedication would guide her through, shaping a path that was uniquely her own. The day of the special performance finally arrived, a day that would forever change her life. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she entered the hall. The stage was larger than any she had ever seen, the piano gleaming under bright lights. The audience filled the seats, murmuring with anticipation, and the famous artists were seated at the front, their eyes observing everything with professional focus. She took a deep breath, feeling her heart race, and reminded herself that this was the moment she had been preparing for all her life. As she approached the piano, the audience quieted. There was a tension in the air, an invisible energy that pressed against her chest. She could feel the weight of expectations, though she knew the only expectation that truly mattered was her own. The instrument before her was more than wood and keys. It was a bridge to the dreams she had held in her heart since she first touched the broken keys in an empty school auditorium. She sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands lightly over the keys, feeling the smooth surface and the cold touch of the metal strings inside. Her first note was soft, almost hesitant, but it carried a purity that captured the room immediately. It was as if the sound had a life of its own, reaching every corner of the hall, touching the audience without words. The famous artists leaned forward slightly, their faces showing genuine astonishment. They had expected skill, perhaps, but not the raw, natural emotion that came through her playing. The single note seemed to echo in the hearts of everyone listening, a declaration of talent and passion that could not be ignored. Encouraged by the reaction, she let her fingers move freely, exploring the melody she had prepared. Each note was deliberate, each chord chosen to convey a feeling. The music was no longer just sound, it was storytelling. The highs and lows, the soft whispers and the powerful crescendos, carried emotion that words could never capture. She lost herself in the music, feeling a deep connection with the audience, as if the piano were speaking on her behalf and revealing a part of her soul. The audience remained spellbound. Teachers, students, and parents watched in awe as the young girl brought life to the instrument. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the sincerity and depth of the music. The famous artists, known for their discerning tastes and high standards, were visibly impressed, exchanging looks that conveyed disbelief and admiration. They had never encountered a performer who could evoke such emotion with such precision and clarity, especially someone so young and from a humble background. As the piece progressed, she grew more confident, letting the music guide her rather than thinking about each individual note. The story within the composition unfolded naturally, with moments of joy, tension, and reflection. Her hands moved over the keys with grace and speed, yet each note remained clear and expressive. The audience was silent, listening not just to the melody but to the emotions it carried, feeling every rise and fall as if it were their own. The famous artists began to whisper to each other, sharing quiet astonishment. One of them, a well-known pianist, raised an eyebrow in surprise, recognizing the rare blend of technical skill and emotional depth. Another nodded subtly, impressed by the maturity in her phrasing and the natural dynamics she brought to the music. They were aware that what they were witnessing was extraordinary, a talent that could rival seasoned performers, and it had emerged from the unlikeliest of places. The climax of the piece approached, and she poured every ounce of feeling into the performance. Her fingers flew across the keys, the music building in intensity, each chord resonating with energy and emotion. The audience was held in suspense, caught in the rising tide of sound that seemed to sweep over them. The hall was filled with the vibrations of the piano, every note perfectly articulated yet overflowing with passion. It was a performance that demanded attention, a story told through music that left no heart untouched. Finally, she reached the final notes, delicate and soft, fading into silence with an almost fragile beauty. The room remained still for a heartbeat, suspended in awe of what they had just heard. Then, as if a spell had been broken, the audience erupted into applause. The sound was overwhelming, a wave of appreciation and admiration that washed over her. The famous artist stood, some clapping vigorously, others shaking their heads in disbelief. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment that would linger in their memories long after the applause had ended. She sat there, breathing heavily, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. Her hands rested on the keys, still warm from the effort, and she allowed herself a small smile. The recognition, the astonishment, the respect from those she had admired from afar, all affirmed that her dedication and passion had not been in vain. For the first time, she truly understood the power of her music and the impact it could have on others. After the performance, the famous artists approached her, offering words of praise and encouragement. One asked how long she had been playing. Another commented on her innate ability to convey emotion through music. Their attention and admiration were overwhelming, yet grounding in a way that made her realize the potential within her. She listened, absorbing their words, feeling a sense of validation and motivation that she had never known before. Her parents rushed forward, tears streaming down their faces. They hugged her tightly, their pride and joy evident in every gesture. They had witnessed their daughter transform from a quiet girl practicing in empty halls to a young musician capable of moving hearts and minds with a single note. Their support had never wavered, but now it was met with recognition and celebration from the wider world. It was a moment of shared triumph, a culmination of years of dedication, patience, and love. As the excitement settled, she realized that this was only the beginning. The astonishment she had inspired was not just a fleeting moment. It was the start of a journey that could take her to places she had only imagined. She understood that with talent, hard work, and persistence, doors that had once seemed closed could now be opened. Her life, which had seemed ordinary and limited, was expanding with possibilities that stretched far beyond the small town she had always known. The experience also taught her humility and perspective. Despite the accolades and astonishment, she remained grounded, aware of the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the empty halls, the worn piano keys, and the quiet hours of practice that had shaped her skill and character. Those moments were the foundation of her success, the quiet truths that would guide her as she continued to grow and explore her music. Over the following days, the story of her performance spread, and people began to speak of the janitor's daughter, whose first note had left famous artists astonished. She received invitations for further lessons, mentorship, and even opportunities to perform in larger venues. Yet she remained focused, prioritizing practice, learning, and the development of her craft over immediate recognition. She knew that talent needed nurturing, and that her journey was far from complete. Every time she sat at the piano, she remembered the moment when her music had captured the hearts of the audience, when the first note had resonated in a way that left even the most experienced musicians amazed. That memory became both inspiration and reminder. Inspiration to continue exploring and creating, and a reminder of how far she had come and the dedication it had required. It grounded her in the understanding that greatness is built through persistence, passion, and a willingness to give everything to one's art. She also began to notice the impact of her music on others. Students approached her quietly, expressing admiration and curiosity. Teachers asked her to play at school events, and local musicians invited her to collaborate or attend workshops. She was becoming a source of inspiration, showing that talent and hard work could emerge from the humblest beginnings. Her story, once hidden in the quiet corners of a small town, was now being told and celebrated, motivating others to pursue their own passions. Through it all, she never lost sight of the essence of her music. It was not about fame, applause, or recognition. It was about expressing herself and connecting with others through sound. Each practice session, each performance, was a journey into her own emotions, a chance to tell stories that could not be spoken. Her music had the power to move people, to create empathy, and to open hearts, and she cherished that power, using it responsibly and thoughtfully. The astonishment of the famous artists, the applause of the audience, and the pride of her parents were all milestones in a much larger journey. She understood that there would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and obstacles to overcome. Yet the experience had shown her that she was capable, that her dedication could yield extraordinary results, and that her dreams were within reach. It was a lesson she would carry with her always, a source of strength and confidence that would guide her through every note she played and every stage she stepped onto. The janitor's daughter, who had once practiced in secret, was no longer hidden. Her music had spoken for her, revealing the depth of her talent, the strength of her character, and the beauty of her spirit. The first note that had left famous artists astonished was more than a sound. It was a declaration of potential, a testament to the power of persistence, and the beginning of a journey that would continue to inspire and move people far beyond her small town. After her performance that left the famous artists astonished, life began to change in ways she had never imagined. Invitations started arriving for private lessons, music workshops, and even small concerts outside her town. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The world she had once observed from a distance was now opening to her, offering opportunities she had only dreamed about while sitting alone at the worn piano in the school auditorium. Her parents continued to support her quietly, providing guidance and reassurance without putting pressure on her. They reminded her to stay humble and focus on the music itself rather than the fame or attention it brought. Their love and wisdom were grounding forces, helping her navigate the new experiences and expectations that came with her growing recognition. She realized that her achievements were not hers alone. They were built on the encouragement and sacrifices of the people who had always believed in her. At her first outside performance, the hall was small but filled with anticipation. People had come to see the janitor's daughter who had astounded famous musicians. She felt her heart pounding as she approached the piano, but as soon as her fingers touched the keys, the nerves melted away. The music poured out naturally, reflecting the countless hours of practice, the lessons learned, and the deep emotion she had cultivated over the years. The audience listened intently, captivated by the story each note told. The performance was a success, and afterward, several attendees approached her, offering praise, guidance, and opportunities for further growth. Some were music teachers, others local performers, but all were impressed by her ability to express emotion through her playing. She listened carefully, grateful for their advice, but she remained focused on developing her own voice. She understood that true artistry came from authenticity, from sharing her own experiences and emotions through music. As she traveled to more venues and met other musicians, she discovered that talent alone was not enough. She needed discipline, persistence, and a willingness to learn from every experience. She took lessons seriously, practiced daily, and absorbed guidance with humility. Each interaction, each performance, was a chance to improve and expand her understanding of music. She learned new techniques, explored different styles, and experimented with her own compositions. Her world, once limited to the small town and the quiet piano in the school auditorium, was now filled with endless possibilities. Despite the growing attention, she never forgot her roots. She returned to her town often, playing small recitals for her community and inspiring other children who had dreams but few opportunities. She shared her story of determination and passion, showing that talent could emerge from any background, regardless of financial or social status. Her performances were not just displays of skill. They were messages of hope, encouragement, and resilience. Her parents watched with pride as she flourished. Her father often remarked on how far she had come, remembering the little girl who had first discovered a broken piano in an empty hall. Her mother felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her daughter's hard work, talent, and dedication were finally being recognized. Yet they were careful to keep her grounded, reminding her of the values that had shaped her: humility, respect, and gratitude. As her reputation grew, she began collaborating with other musicians and participating in larger concerts and events. Each experience challenged her, pushing her to refine her technique and expand her expressive range. She faced moments of self-doubt, but she learned to channel them into her music, letting the emotions fuel her performances. Her playing became more nuanced, more powerful, and more personal, reflecting the depth of her journey and the lessons she had learned along the way. The attention from famous artists continued, some offering mentorship, others encouraging her to audition for prestigious music programs. She approached these opportunities thoughtfully, understanding that each step was part of a larger journey. Her focus remained on growth, on mastering her craft, and on expressing the emotions that lived within her through music. She knew that success was not a destination but a process, and she embraced every challenge as a chance to improve and evolve. Her life was no longer confined to the small town where she had grown up. She traveled to different cities, experienced new cultures, and performed in a variety of settings. Each journey expanded her perspective, enriched her music, and deepened her understanding of herself and the world around her. Yet no matter how far she traveled or how much recognition she received, she remained connected to her beginnings, remembering the quiet hours of practice, the support of her parents, and the simple joy of discovering her first melodies. Through it all, she remained humble and compassionate, using her growing influence to inspire others. She visited schools, community centers, and local events, encouraging young musicians to pursue their passions. She shared her story openly, emphasizing that talent could thrive anywhere with dedication, patience, and a willingness to learn. Her experiences became a source of hope and motivation for many, showing that even the most modest beginnings could lead to extraordinary achievements. Over time, she began composing her own music, creating pieces that reflected her journey, her emotions, and her vision. Her compositions were praised for their depth, emotion, and originality, capturing the hearts of audiences and critics alike. She learned to tell stories through her music, each note and phrase carefully chosen to convey meaning and feeling. Her work became a reflection of her identity, her experiences, and her dedication to the art she loved. Despite the growing demands of her career, she remained committed to her own development. She practiced daily, studied new techniques, and explored different genres. She understood that mastery required continual effort and a willingness to challenge herself. Each performance, each composition, was a step forward, a chance to grow, and a testament to the perseverance that had brought her this far. Her journey also taught her the importance of resilience. There were setbacks, moments of disappointment, and times when she questioned her abilities. Yet each challenge became a lesson, a chance to strengthen her resolve and refine her approach. She learned to embrace mistakes, to view them as opportunities for growth, and to continue moving forward with determination and grace. As she looked back on her journey, she realized how far she had come from the small town, the modest home, and the broken piano that had sparked her passion. Her music had taken her places she had never imagined, introduced her to people who inspired and guided her, and allowed her to touch the hearts of countless listeners. Yet the most important lesson she carried was the understanding that talent alone was not enough. It was dedication, perseverance, and the courage to pursue her dreams that had made the difference. Her story became well known, not just for her extraordinary skill, but for the inspiration it provided to others. People admired her for her humility, her compassion, and her unwavering dedication to her craft. She continued to perform, compose, and inspire, using her music as a bridge to connect with others, to share emotions, and to create a positive impact. Her journey demonstrated that with talent, hard work, and a supportive environment, even the most unlikely individuals could achieve remarkable things. In the end, the janitor's daughter who had once practiced alone in an empty hall had become a symbol of hope and possibility. Her first note, which had astonished famous artists, was not just a moment of recognition. It was the beginning of a life dedicated to music, growth, and inspiring others. She continued to play, to create, and to share her gift with the world, knowing that the journey was ongoing and that every note she played carried the promise of new beginnings and endless potential.